Today, I have Kamini Wood. She's a certified professional coach. She wants to help you live to your full potential. I'm here for it. I'm always stretching for my potential. She works with teens, college age students, adults, young or not as young.
Right. That's
And
right.
she has some wonderful programs she'll probably mention to us. Kamini loves working with high achievers and overachievers and high
Mhm.
performers. So I'm really excited to learn whatever she's here to ready to teach us about having self-love while also dealing with a high achieving personality, let's say.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Great. Tell me a little bit about your decision to work with high achievers
Mhm.
and high performers, overachievers. Are you one yourself?
I love that question because it outs me right away. I am absolutely an overachiever, high achiever, perfectionist, all the things. And to be fair, I think my kids are as well. So my oldest is actually a professional ballerina, and my second oldest plays Division I collegiate sports. So I've been raising high achievers too.
Mhm.
And it's not to say that I don't work with people who don't classify themselves as high achievers, because sometimes
Right.
we don't even realize that we are in the bucket of overachievers or high achievers, and it's not it's never to say let's put some work with those people, but because I know the mentality so well, I mean, I've done my own self work through it and continue to, because I do think as humans we're constantly evolving and growing. I understand and resonate with the mentality so well that I'm able to do, I believe, really good work with those people.
Amazing. And do you believe, is there a connection with self-love and any of those other components of one's personality and doing good work?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
I'm all about self-love, but beyond self-love, for me, it's about self-acceptance. And I believe
Mhm.
that self-love is underneath that domain. So oftentimes we hear a lot of people talking about building your self-confidence and building your self-esteem, which I would never argue with, but those two items are very externally focused, meaning it's a comparison to others. So when we talk about self-acceptance, what we're really talking about is accepting ourselves, all parts of ourselves, those that we deem imperfect, as well as those that we deem really great parts of ourselves. And we're saying we accept all of them and we love all of them. And that's where that self-love piece comes in. I think self-love has a little bit been marketed at this point, where people think, oh, self-love means just taking a spa day or getting your nails done, or, self-love is actually deeper. It's about how you talk to yourself on a daily basis. When you notice the internal critic, what choices do you make at that point? Self-love can take the shape of, yes, taking some time to just be for 5 to 10 minutes in a given day, rather than continuing to do. In addition to those things like going to the spa and getting your nails done. I'm not opposed to those things either.
Mhm. Yeah, if anyone wants to treat us to a spa day, we will
I'm all
accept.
for it. I will take it. I will absolutely take it.
100% agree. And self-acceptance, it does not take any money to do. And I agree with you. The other qualities build under that, because if you don't accept yourself at a certain point, it doesn't matter how many other people validate you outside of
Oh yeah.
yourself. We have to come home to ourselves every day, and we have to live with ourselves no matter what else happens.
Absolutely. And that's why a lot of times we face those moments where it's almost like it's a hit, right? We get a hit from the external validation, but it's short-lived because
Mhm.
we're not continually getting it. The only place you
Mhm.
can continually get that is from true self-acceptance, right? Because that's
Mhm.
within yourself, that's within your domain.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're constantly chasing it or constantly looking for it outside of yourself. And so then when you're not receiving it, that's when you start to feel bad about yourself, or you're taking in all the judgments of other people.
Mhm. Yes, exactly. And we don't want to take on the judgments of other people, because it's not ours to take on, and those
It's not
judgments
ours,
probably aren't
and
going
we
to
can't
end.
control it. We can't control it
No,
either.
exactly. I am curious. I was getting the psychic pull to ask you about your childhood. I know nothing about your childhood, and you
Mhm.
can talk about whatever elements you want, And yet I'm also curious the most, I think about, are there challenges that either shaped you or that you overcame from a younger age that impact who you are now or the work that you do?
Absolutely. I don't shy away from the fact that, as a daughter of immigrant parents, I grew up in a very predominantly white town. I loved where I grew up, but it was predominantly white. I had a name like Kamini, definitely different than everyone else's, and my skin color was different. I knew
Right.
that at 5 or 6 years old. I knew I looked different and my name was different. And I knew that at home we had a different culture than the people around us. And so there was a big part of me at 5 and 6 years old that wanted to belong, but also was being treated differently because I looked different. Right. And I
Right.
know that now as an adult, and it's not about blaming or judging anybody for any of those actions or what they said to me or didn't say to me, but it's recognizing that as a 5 or 6 year old, the way that I internalized that for me was, in order to belong, I needed to make sure that people were okay with me, happy with me, recognizing that, like, I wasn't scary. I was okay. I was good enough to be friends with, right? And I was good enough to belong
Right.
to their group. And so that's really where my
Yes.
people pleasing tendencies started, because I wanted to fit in. I mean, we're humans, and humans want, so
Yes.
we want emotional social connection, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
those were the qualities that I started taking on, and they started getting bigger and bigger as I grew into adulthood. Also, being the daughter of immigrant parents who were working really hard, long days to provide for my sister and I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to cause them anything else to worry about. So I
Right.
took on my perfectionism. I mean, again, there's no blame or anything in this.
Right.
It's just
Right.
recognizing that as a 5 or 6 year old, I realized that if I was the good girl and I also didn't make mistakes and I didn't do anything wrong, my parents didn't have anything to worry about. I would not be a burden to them.
Mm-hmm.
So now you add in the
Right.
perfectionism, right? And so that just carried with me throughout all the way into adulthood. I mean, I would have
Mm-hmm.
relationships where I overgave, and I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, friendships, constantly overgiving, but not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily receiving in return.
Yes. I've been there
And
too, especially in friendships.
in friendships a lot, and you don't
Yeah.
notice it, you almost kind of just accept that that's what it is.
Right.
And a lot of that also led me to just kind of always be behind the scenes, like just put everybody in front, to shy away from, it's never you, it's always about the other person. They need to shine, it's them, it's their, and it's not, again, to say that I needed to be shining in front of everybody. That wasn't what I'm an introvert by nature anyway, so that wouldn't make sense for me. But
Yeah.
it did keep me playing small for a very long time.
Mm.
And then as I became a mom and started seeing my kids started getting older, obviously. And so when they got into their preteen, teen years, they were starting to show those people pleasing perfectionism,
Mm.
really diminishing themselves in deference to others. And so that was my catalyst moment where I realized, okay, this is coming from how I'm showing up. So let me do my work
Mm.
here. Let me understand what's happening. And that's where I really understood that internalized message of not being good enough or needing to belong that came from a very young age. Did my own
Yes.
self-work, and also realized that in my professional world, I was always drawn to coaching people in any role that I had, because I was a
Mm.
project manager and then I ran my
Mm.
husband's law firm. Everything that I did eventually went back to talking to people about what it is that they wanted, and how they could get that. And so I realized that that's truly what my calling was, yes, lean into that and lean into this personal experience that I've had and bring those two things together and help other people figure out what's missing or what's keeping them stagnant or stuck, and help them move themselves forward into their human potential. I mean, that's why I say that I'm a human potential coach more than anything, because I do all the things. You want to talk about
Yes.
relationships? Let's talk about relationships. You want to talk about career? We can absolutely talk about that. It's all the things that create you as a
Mm.
human.
I love that. And I love that you were present enough to observe what was happening with your children, to not take it as an indictment against yourself of
Yeah.
reacting in whatever judgy way, or maybe you did for a day, who knows, but then you decided, okay, I'm going to do something about this and lean in and be willing to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And let me
and
just say that real quick on that point.
yeah.
It's about being willing to change. So
Mm.
often people do reach out, but they're not there where they're ready to actually sit with it, because it's not comfortable. I mean, I
Right.
never lie to people and say this is going to be a super easy. I mean, anytime that you're doing that self work, there's going to be uncomfortability because you're taking a look at what hasn't been working or what's no longer serving you. And that's not always fun.
Right.
So absolutely being willing. And I was absolutely willing, because anybody knows that if they know me, that my kids are absolutely like, they have been my best teacher in life, but they are also
Yes.
my why. And I know that's like very cliche, but when it came to seeing them mirror back to me and knowing that that wasn't going to serve them in the long run, there was no question. It was just, okay, what do I have to do here? What do I have to do in order to shift this so that this doesn't get repeated generationally? Now, I will say that, you don't change personalities. So my middle daughter, she definitely has that people pleasing personality. She's very empathetic. And I do say that even my people pleasing, while I say that it is a strength in the sense that I'm very empathetic, it just becomes a weakness when I lean too far into it. And so I've really talked to her a lot about that too. I know that you're very empathetic, and that's huge. It's a huge strength of yours. Just be aware of when you might be leaning too far into it and over giving or over functioning for somebody.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yes, because it can be helpful. And I'm also thinking of in the hospitality industry, that whole industry is built upon, let's find people's needs and please them and serve them and make them come back again. So it can be a healthy thing, and it can help communities get along, families get along. And the overgiving is where it starts to tip from the balance of healthy connecting and empathizing and sympathizing to not so healthy for the individual.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Did you notice as you shifted how they shifted, and or was everybody aware of, okay, mom's doing something different now?
It's really interesting. My older ones absolutely knew because I shared with them. My younger ones didn't, because they weren't even aware that there was something happening. But in terms of how they shifted, I definitely saw a difference in how they were communicating with friends, for instance, especially my teenagers, because, those years are so difficult, especially with the peer pressure and the societal pressures that they have these days. And I noticed that they were able to hold boundaries better than they had been before. And I'm such an advocate for boundaries because I didn't have any for so long. And just watching my kids be able to really communicate what they were willing to participate in and what they weren't, without feeling like, because FOMO is a real thing for all of us, not just teenagers. And so watching them evolve into even naming it, like, yeah, right now I have fear of missing out here, but I also know that this is not going to be a healthy situation for me. So I'm going to opt not to go. That's a huge difference than how I believe it would have gone had I not been so vocal about how I was shifting and changing.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really great modeling for them. Is there a moment you can think about that you'd be willing to share where there were boundaries that you were shifting, and walk us through how you got yourself to actually hold the boundary? Because what I know happens with people is they know they want to hold a boundary and they don't do it, and they know it and they don't. And it's that there's always the after effect of, yeah, that happened again, and I can't change. I believe that they can change human potential. We know they can change, but sometimes it's that, how do you get from the, I know I want to have a boundary, through the discomfort and actually achieve it? Do you have any personal stories or thoughts on that?
That's a great question, because absolutely that was me. I would say I'm going to set this boundary, and then as soon as there was a little bit of conflict, I would totally back off of it. And when we think about that, really, it's not a boundary. That's just a suggestion. If we don't hold the boundary or have a consequence for boundary being crossed, it's really just a suggestion for the other person. I know that I had to do that even in the law practice. I was taking on more than what was on my plate to do. And I really did have to hold a boundary around, this is my domain, and I'm willing to support you if you need help, but I'm also not willing to take on everything, which was really hard, because especially when you're running a business with your partner, you don't want to see your partner in any way, shape, or form feeling bad or frustrated or stressed out,
Yes.
but it was recognizing that I was actually enabling it by continuing to not hold the boundary. And that's really what we have to recognize. We do have a part when we don't hold a boundary. We do have a part in what's unfolding in front of us. It also
Mhm.
happens in motherhood, right? So in terms
Yes.
of as our kids get older, holding a boundary around, I'm not going to take care of that for you. So like with my older kids, they would love for me to still schedule their doctor's appointments, but
Mm.
I simply just say, like, I can remind you, but that's as much as I
Mhm.
can do. After that, it's on you to actually schedule that appointment and follow through. Versus
Mhm.
if I didn't do that, they're not learning how to have autonomy over things like self-care. Doctor's appointment is
Right.
self-care. So that's just another
Yes.
example in my world how, and as a mom, you fall into the trap of like, okay, let me just take care of that for you.
Mhm.
Even right now, my daughter's getting ready to move and she needs to find a storage unit, and I have to hold the boundary of, well, these are the places that I would call, and I'm going to
Right.
let you go ahead and take care of that. The
Mhm.
old me would have been like, sure, let me add it to my list of things to do and let me figure out
Right.
how to call for you. So yeah.
Mhm. Yes, that's so good. I'm thinking of the phrase learned helplessness of when you help people so much, after a while, they're always used to you helping, always used to
Mhm.
you doing the whatever the things are. And even if they can do it, they're accustomed to just asking. I can clearly remember there was a time my car broke down and I thought, well, I need to call my parents. But then I also thought, well, but what if I can't call them? How would I figure it out on my own?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
those moments of and that's helping them bridge into adulthood too for
Right.
people who have teens. But even my kids are 4 and 9, and all of the time, maybe it comes from my teacher background too, of knowing the more quickly I can equip them with the autonomy and the skills of taking care of their own responsibilities, the more I'm building them so that they don't move out at 18 and have no idea how to make a meal or do laundry
Right.
or any of that. Like
Right.
they're doing it
Yes.
as quickly as possible because they're capable human beings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People are always shocked that my 19-year-old son is excited about the fact that next semester he's going to be in an apartment style dorm, and he's
Ooh,
thrilled
nice.
because he can make his own meals. And he's like,
Oh,
I would
nice.
much rather I prefer to cook for myself than the dining hall food. And he never had an issue with laundry. People are like, "Oh, does he not do no, he has been doing his laundry since he was 10 years old, not because I was parentifying him, but I was giving him autonomy to know that that's his and he can do it any
Mhm,
which way he wants to. And if he chooses not
mhm,
to fold his clothes and put them away, then he's going to deal with the fact that his shirts are wrinkled. And he figured out, oh,
mhm.
I would like to put my shirts away.
Yeah. I'm so excited to tell you about the newly released Talk to the Trees, written by myself. Talk to the Trees is a short book about learning from the wisdom of these elder beings. What can we gain from them in terms of resilience, how to get through hard times, how to approach the times that we're in? What do trees know about love, family, and connection, and dealing with hardships of life? You can buy it at the places linked below. I would love it if you check it out, share it with a friend, buy it for a friend, and spread the word. Yes, yes. And it also allows the person doing the setting the boundaries to there's going to be discomfort on both sides, pretty much, I'm
Yes.
thinking, but it
Yes.
allows us to step back and think, okay, I'm going to sit with it and let
Yep.
them be uncomfortable too.
Yes. So often, people talk about setting boundaries, and I do too, but we don't really vocalize that it's not always easy because for the person setting the boundary who has not set them before, there's definitely going to be uncomfortability. Sometimes there's guilt. Sometimes there's the
Mhm.
inner dialogue that says I'm being mean by doing
Mhm.
this. And it's working through that on the end of the person setting the boundary. For the person on the receiving end, they're receiving this new boundary that has never been put forth before. So it's very uncomfortable for them as well because
Mhm.
they've got to figure out this new dynamic. Now, the people
Mhm.
who do stick with it and figure it out and are willing to respect the boundary, then that's great. Let's work together and move this relationship forward. And I often say that those that don't want to acclimate to your boundary are the ones that were actually really benefiting from your lack of boundaries and only wanted to be in that dynamic with you as long as you didn't have those
Right.
boundaries. And so they're not really actually respecting you. So it gives you the ability to slow down and ask, is this a relationship that's actually healthy for me, or one that is beneficial for my growth and well-being? So sometimes
Yes.
also setting boundaries, as uncomfortable as it can be, starts to illuminate what relationships are in our best interest and which ones maybe we've been holding on to for a little too long.
I 100% agree. And sometimes I think people can assume the respect or energy they bring to the relationship is equally reciprocated. And then in those moments, you can see if it's not, maybe you don't want to have the same level of involvement. Maybe you want to shift away. When it's family
Right.
or people who we have to see all the time, or work colleagues, coworkers, whoever, then there's a different nuance of how do you still
How do
work
you
with it.
shift? Right. Right.
hmm
Yes.
But
Yeah.
but I think it is that moment of you have more knowledge so that you're not living in the illusion that they respect you or want to treat you equal to how they do, because even though it hurts, they may not.
Right. No, that's a great point. And you're right. Like, for instance, in terms of work colleagues, when we become aware of that, then we have a choice point of how we want to maybe shift the dynamics of that relationship. I'm thinking about a client right now who's actually in the process of shifting a relationship and dynamic with another coworker because that mutual respect wasn't there, and they just became aware of it. And again, it's not easy. It's not easy to kind of
Mhm.
deal with the awareness because there's hurt there, there's sadness there, and it's important
Right.
to honor those feelings as well. And then really ask yourself, well, what do I need here? And figure out what would be the most beneficial for you to continue to move forward, because we can't always pick up and leave, right? Like, so in
Right.
work situations we can't always pick up and quit and leave, or in family
Mhm.
dynamics we can't just suddenly, I mean, let me back up. You absolutely can decide if a relationship is not worth or is not beneficial for you, and you can say, I'm no longer going to be in a relationship with this person. So I take that back, that you can't do it, but sometimes in the moment it's not easy to maneuver that. And so we have to get into that place of, can I create a dynamic that is
Mhm.
workable for me
Mhm.
without necessarily completely cutting this person off?
Yes, yes. And one thing I think that's helpful is I see boundaries, especially with people that one recognizes you may have an ongoing relationship with. It's not it's not like a country boundary of this is the line and it will forever be here and this is exactly how it is. There's an experimenting and a fluidity sometimes of finding what is the best balance of still engaging with that person and maintaining your own integrity and respect and all of that. There's some interplay, I think.
There absolutely is. Oftentimes, I think people think that if they set a boundary, it's forever and always, and
Right.
they more equate it with building a wall. And I
Yes.
often say that it's not a wall; it's more like a fence. You know, fences you
Mhm.
can erect, you can see through, you can walk in and out of through a
Mhm.
door, you can hear through them, and also they can be moved. Right.
Right.
So you could set that up, and this is what works for me today. And then maybe in a month it can shift and we just move it at that point.
Right.
So it's movable. It's, negotiable, for instance, in some cases. And when I say negotiable, I don't mean with the other person, I mean with yourself, right? Because you're
Yes.
the one that's saying this works for me, this doesn't. So you can negotiate with yourself as you grow and evolve. Maybe you don't need to have a boundary that you've had before. Like, maybe when you're starting off the work, the boundary is a little bit further out, and then as you
Mhm.
start figuring out who you are, and your self-acceptance is growing and that self-love is growing, you can now start moving the boundary a little, slightly, right? And you're doing it as
Yes.
you're growing and evolving as well.
Mhm. Excellent. And I want to talk about human potential some. So you're mentioning
Mhm.
evolving, and I know
Yeah.
this is a passion of yours. So
Mhm.
I'm pretty open to whatever you want to say that you think people need to know. Maybe it's what is our human potential, or what are your top 3 tips about, oh, you want to have more of your own potential coming forth? How do you bring it out? I'm here for any of it because what bad things could we say about potential?
Right. So one of the things I often say is your human potential is yours, meaning you are the chooser, you're the creator, you're the destroyer of your own human potential, because so often we get caught up in how do other people see me? What's the perception they have of me? What are the judgments they have of me? And all that does is that puts us in a box. The other really important part of living into your own human potential is self-compassion over self-judgment. I'm a huge believer in the practice of self-compassion, and I really am, because I was not very nice to myself. Anytime I even dared to make even the slightest bit of a mistake, I would put myself down to no end. And I was just talking to a client the other day about this. She was sharing with me that, she used to always be able to push herself forward, and now she just can't. And I was sharing with her that your human potential doesn't come from beating yourself up. Your human potential actually lies in when you are kind to yourself and give yourself some grace and the space to figure out what it is you want, need, and what you value. That's when you can truly live into what you are actually capable of creating for yourself. And that's really what we're doing, is creating our own story for our own life. And when we recognize that we actually have autonomy over that, we really can live into our own human potential. It's just that we get so caught up in other people's narratives for us, or other false beliefs that we have accumulated and taken on as our own. When we think about it, most of our belief systems are, yes, our belief systems that we accumulate through life, but that ripe age between 0 to 7, when our subconscious is taking in everything, and so a lot of people think, well, I didn't have a big trauma in my life, like there's nothing happening. And yet they're sitting there and they're stagnant in their career, for instance. And it's like, if we could just understand some of the experiences you had, they weren't big T traumas. They were just experiences and messages. And maybe along the way, there was a false belief that was accumulated that you're not good enough, or that you don't deserve more than what you have. And so now we take that through line, and we're recognizing that their human potential has been stunted by this unknown, unaware of belief that there's only so much that they can have, or that they don't deserve more than X, whatever that is. When we bring that to the awareness, now we have this choice point of saying, okay, what's actually true? And if I really were to take committed action based in my core values as my adult self, or my own self, rather than some story of what my values are, what choices and actions would I take? And now we're starting to live into our human potential. So there you have it.
I love it. I'm here for all of it. And back to this, every person's core values, that is a very unique thing. And when we have the self-compassion, which I also am a big advocate of, you can think of your values, you have the self-compassion, you can let all the external expectations fall away, and you can live into your potential. I may have the potential in theory to be an Olympic athlete, but I don't want to be. That's not my thing. But I have other aspirations. And so I think, but letting away the culture's ideas of what success is, or what this is, and returning to, well, what are your values, and what are your skill sets too? Then that compassion and reflection within allows you to emerge in your own life. And I also love how you brought up a little T trauma, or anything that was a suggestion that we took on as a child. Sure, that might have been great for a 5-year-old or even a 10-year-old, but for a 35-year-old or 50-year-old, that is limiting you now. And so letting yourself become aware of your limitations, that are things that are of just the mind, that are not true long-term limitations, shifting so you can have a different belief, opens up all of this potential. And I love that.
A great example of that is, as a little child, maybe in elementary school, being told things and rules around, keeping your voice quiet, for instance, right? We don't speak out. Now you take that belief, my voice isn't meant to be heard unless I'm actually addressed, right?
Right.
Now you take that into adulthood and you recognize that you don't speak up, for instance, in meetings, or there
Mm-hmm.
is, we've got so many different things that we're dealing with as a world, and just happening day in and day
Mm-hmm.
out. You talk about the environment, you talk about, you and I
Right.
just chatted about like anti-racism. I mean,
Yeah.
take that belief of I'm not meant to, like, I'm not supposed to speak up or speak out unless I've been called on. And
Right.
now we're not leading and allowing our voices to be heard with what actually matters to us. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just, that's a small microcosm of an example of a belief or a thought that was taken on by an interaction that we had in elementary school. And then it stuck
Right.
with us in our subconscious. And then it's playing out into adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And some of them we got from TV or media. I think
Yeah.
about when we were younger, I don't know if you noticed this, but the phrase I can sleep when I'm dead used to be so popular. And
Uh-huh.
now if people say that, I feel that we look at them like that's actually a really bad idea.
Right, exactly.
But if you heard and we're like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm all about that. It's like,
Yes.
and then you start burning out and
Uh-huh.
and you've also gone along with like work, work, work and not rest and this hamster wheel of adrenaline. And I'm thinking to the high performing and the
Mhm.
overachieving, it's you can lose your own ability to recognize, well, humans need to rest. Every
Yes.
athlete needs recovery periods.
Yes,
We need
exactly.
that downtime
Mhm.
to 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 just be whole in all the ways that we are.
That's so true, and I actually work with some athletes as well, and that's something that comes up routinely
Really.
is, when they feel guilty for resting, for instance. Like,
Mm,
I should be on the field right now. I should be in the gym right
mm,
now, and it's really, I mean, the work that we do together is understanding what's the fear in that. Because anytime we talk about
right.
shoulds, there's usually a fear behind it. But it
Mm-hmm.
also comes from from the belief system of you've got to keep going. It's what you said, I'll rest when I'm dead. And it's just, is that really a
Right.
healthy belief system? Is it serving us
Right.
is really what we're coming down
Yes,
to.
exactly. And I think a lot about what I notice with myself and with clients and or my kids and other people I know. I always return to the things that are coming internally are a much better driving force than these external forces. And I mean, if we live in a world, so we're going to have to deal with the
Yeah.
external forces, but the internal drives and motivations, that's typically more a better gauge sometimes of, if you feel like resting, that's the internal desire to rest, whether or not externally that's the message you're getting.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And using our internal thermometer, so to speak, because
Hmm.
externally, that's the thing too, is I think we get caught up in how people are going to judge us. Like if they see me resting, they're going to think I'm lazy. And
Hmm.
at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, so what?
Right.
We can't control their judgment anyway, because the truth is, even
Hmm.
if they see us going constantly, they're going to have a judgment or an opinion about that as well. So at the end of the
Hmm.
day, if we continue to always live by how somebody else is judging us or by their validation, it's always driving, we're going to be chasing forever, and instead it's coming back home to self.
Exactly. I love that. What other tips or insight do you have to help people bring themselves back to self and or tap into their human potential?
Well, for me, it's always about one, taking the time to recognize what your core values are. The second one is core beliefs. As you alluded to before, growing up, we are influenced by our family upbringing. We're influenced by
Mm-hmm.
culture. We're influenced by society. And then, of course, our own personality has a bearing on that as well. Taking the
Right.
time to say, what do I actually believe? But then that third pillar for me is core needs. So often we're not clear on what it is that we actually need as individuals to be able to live the life that we actually want for ourselves. And it's important to figure out what all three of those are. So values, beliefs, needs, and together that can create the ability for you to figure out what the goals are that you have for yourself. What would be meaningful
Mm-hmm.
for you to create, rather than just arbitrarily setting goals based on, again, what society tells us we should be, our
Right.
family. I mean, as much as we love our family, ultimately we have to feel connected to the life that we're living. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
we're doing the thing and we kind of look up and we're somewhat disconnected, or there's something missing. We're not feeling completely fulfilled. And it's because we're not connected to the stuff that we're actually doing. It's not truly meaningful for us.
Oh yeah, that's so good. Okay, so there's a part of me that thinks I would love to know, do you have an assessment for core needs, or how do people figure those out? So, I mean, and some might
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
obvious, but I also think I have a core need that I just figured out last year that has been in my life, my entire life, and I didn't realize it for years.
The way that I work with my clients on it is I do ask a series of questions.
Cool. I
And
love
those
it.
questions, and they're not just like, so what do you need? Because they'll just look at
Yes.
me and say, I don't know.
Yes.
It's
Right.
coming at it in a different way of like, tell me about some experiences you've had. Because even values, for instance, there are so many value exercises out there, and I'm not
Oh,
putting them
yes.
down, but many of them just literally give you a list and they're like, okay, so which ones resonate with you? And the
Yeah.
truth is, you can sit with that list, and for me personally, most of the words resonate. I'm like, yep, that's
Right.
important. That's important. So instead,
Uh-huh.
if we start getting curious about what we've experienced and how we've experienced it and what came up for us through the experiences, not just cognitively, but also somatically, now we're getting into understanding ourselves on that deeper level. And when we have that understanding, we can now extrapolate with, so we can put words to it, right? So often, for
Mhm.
instance, we talk about feelings, but we forget that with feelings are sensations. So
Yes.
it's pushing ourselves to really start coming at it from not just here's a list and let's cognitively decide. It's also
Mhm.
figuring out how we've experienced certain things and extrapolating from that. So needs are no different in that regard.
I love that, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I also have seen those lists many times, and every time I do it, I either remember what I put before and I put that, or I think, "Oh, yeah, like 20 of these 50 things look great,
Right.
therefore, guess I have a lot of values." And it's so true because I think it's one of those, we're so used to living our lives that to be retrospective and to pause and reflect, a list like that isn't actually that helpful because it still just keeps people in their heads, and you could pick things that sound good or that you think
Right.
other people think. I'm thinking of family values. I feel like it's one of those things where people are like, that sounds great, but what are actually your experiences show that you're
Right.
valuing?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool that you do the questions with people, and then you can probably also hear and notice the nuances of what they're speaking about and draw that out more.
Hmm. Hmm. And they might not even hear it. So
Mm.
when I'm able to listen and then say, I just heard this, tell me more about that, they're suddenly like,
Mhm.
oh, I didn't even realize I said that.
Mm. That's
And that's
exciting.
part of it, right? Is helping people become aware of the things that have been hidden is really what
Mhm.
we're doing.
Yes, yes, and
Mhm.
that's so much fun because once you see something that you haven't, that kind of was camouflaged in your life, then it really changes so many experiences, and you start noticing it where you hadn't noticed before.
Totally. Totally. And
Mm.
once I love what you just said. Once you see it, it's you can't unsee it, right? You can't
Right.
unknow it.
Yes, that's so true. Well, this has been a delight. Please tell the listeners what you want us to know and how they can get in touch with you. And the links will be below. However, tell us the first place you'd like people to find you.
Sure. So my website, kaminiwood.com, there are a lot of free resources on there, including many blog articles on things such as self-compassion and also just different topics in general. I do work one-to-one with people. So there's information on my coaching services there. For those who maybe aren't ready to do the one-to-one or maybe aren't ready to invest in that, I did just release a 6-week course called Stop Treating Yourself Like Shit. So that's also accessible from my website. And then I'm on social, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, all with the handle It's Authentic Me.
Mm, I love that. It's authentic me. That's so good. And thank you for helping people to live more authentically and have more self-love, self-compassion, self-acceptance. That's such great work that you do.
Thank you.
I am a psychic who helps people in business who understands business. And what I can tell you is if there are 5 things or 6 things that you're considering doing in your business and you wish you knew which ones not to do, together we can tune in and eradicate 3 to 5 of those. You only have 1 or 2 things to focus on. Imagine the massive amount of time and energy and wondering this could save you. If you could just commit to the thing because you know that this is what's totally aligned with you and your business right now and this time, that moves you forward. That gives you so much action to pour into your business. Now, if you listen, there's a playlist. You can look at other sessions that clients have had, and you'll notice time and time again, they get 1 to 2 to 3 specific areas that are green lights for them to work on in their business. Things that they can really focus on that are definitely going to help them. Occasionally, they also get the clarity on don't do these other things. It's not going to work for you. It's not in your best interest right now. And how beautiful is it in this time and world of so many choices, so many options, to already have it narrowed down to these are things to focus on. These are things that are not going to work for you. And to have that extra bit of confidence, that stamp of approval saying, this also feels internally aligned. So not only are you thinking it, but this is what I'm reading from your energy field, from spirit, from the infinite field of possibilities that is maximally aligned for your potential. That's what makes life and business so much fun. So I am really looking forward to our first session together. May it be the first of many. Go ahead. There's the booking link below. See you soon.